My name is Mike Donovan. 15 years ago, I traded the bustling city of Vancouver for a quiet cabin on the shores of Wildwood Lake, deep in British Columbia. Here, there's no cell reception, no internet, no neighbors, just ancient pine trees, a crystal clear lake, and a sky that hangs so low in winter you feel like you could touch the northern lights with your hand. People often ask me why I chose this life. At first, I'd always say it was because I love nature and the peace of solitude. Now, I just shrug. After my divorce from Carol and the injury that forced me to leave my job in emergency services, this place became my refuge and my healing. The only thing I regretted was the distance this decision created between me and my son, Tommy. He'd visit every summer for a month, and every winter, I'd count the days until his Christmas holiday visit. But between those visits, there was a void nothing could fill. That winter was especially harsh. For 3 weeks, temperatures hovered around 20 below lake. I remember the sun barely breaking through the thick clouds, casting eerie blue shadows on the ice. The frost bit my cheeks, and my breath turned into silver clouds of steam. I was about halfway across when I heard it, a faint cracking sound that any experienced northerner would recognize instantly. I froze and looked down at the ice beneath my feet. A web of fine cracks spread with every breath I took. "Damn it," I muttered, shifting my weight carefully from foot to foot. It was too late to turn back. Straight ahead, maybe 100 meters away, was a patch of solid ice I could recognize by its deep blue color. Slowly, arms outstretched for balance, I started moving. 10 steps, 20, 30. The ice kept cracking but held. With less than 30 meters left to the safe zone, I spotted a dark patch ahead. At first, I thought it was just a cloud shadow, but then I saw the shape, a hole in the ice, and not a small one. I cursed under my breath. Now I had to circle around the hole, risking a fall with every step. I was about to turn right when something in that hole caught my attention. A faint movement, too deliberate to be caused by wind or current. And as I stared, I saw what made me forget my own safety. In the icy water, a large animal was clinging to the edge of the hole. It was a wolf. Its silver-gray fur clung to its body, looking unnaturally thin in the freezing water. Its head was tilted back, eyes closed. But most importantly, its front paws were still gripping the ice, meaning it was alive and fighting. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was my old rescue instincts, or maybe I just couldn't stand there and watch a creature slowly dying under the ice. I pulled a rope from my backpack, something I always carried, a habit from my northern years, and started crawling carefully toward the hole, spreading my weight evenly across the ice. "Hang on, friend," I muttered, even though I knew the wolf couldn't hear me. "I'm almost there." When I was close enough, I made a loop at the end of the rope. I had to get it around the wolf's head or neck to pull it out without getting too close to the edge. The first throw failed. The loop slipped off the wet fur. The second try worked better. I tightened the noose carefully and, inch by inch, began pulling the wolf from its death trap. The ice cracked louder and louder. ZC.
At one point, I was sure we'd both end up in the water, but I kept going. When the wolf's front half was on the ice, the animal gave a weak shudder, a sign of life that gave me strength. After a few more agonizing minutes of effort, the wolf was completely out of the water. It was unconscious but breathing, its chest rising and falling slowly. Now came the hardest part, getting it to shore. Leaving the wolf here meant certain death from the cold, but carrying that much weight on thin ice was insane. I compromised. I made a makeshift sled from my coat, laid the wolf on it, and inched my way toward shore, picking the safest path I could find. I don't know how long it took, maybe an hour, maybe 2. The sun had already dipped below the horizon by the time I finally dragged my unusual cargo to the cabin, soaked and freezing, but oddly satisfied. Only inside, in the warm glow of the kerosene lamp, could I get a proper look at the animal I'd saved. It was a large male, no longer young but not old either. As the ice melted from its fur, I saw it had an unusual silver-gray coat, nearly white around the neck, rare for this region, where wolves were usually darker. But what struck me most were its eyes. It opened them briefly as I laid it by the stove, pale amber, almost golden, with tiny black flecks like a starry winter sky. "What am I supposed to do with you, friend?" I muttered as I toweled its fur dry. "You know this isn't a zoo, right?" The funny thing was, it never even crossed my mind to take it back to the woods half alive. That would have been like rescuing someone from a frozen lake only to throw them into a blizzard. That evening, I made a space for it in the corner, far enough from the stove to avoid shock from sudden heat. I trimmed the fur around a small wound on its side. It looked like it hadn't just fallen through the ice accidentally, but had been fleeing something or someone. I cleaned the wound with antiseptic and bandaged it. The whole time, the wolf was in a strange, half-conscious state, not resisting, but not entirely helpless either. "Listen," I told it as I finished the bandaging. "Once you're better, you're going back to the woods. I can't keep a wolf in the house, especially with my son around." Of course, the wolf didn't answer, but I thought I saw a flicker of understanding in its eyes. A few hours later, it drank water from my hand and ate some cooked meat I offered. Then it closed its eyes and seemed to sleep. I sat in the chair across from it, unwilling to leave it unattended. My hand kept drifting toward the rifle hanging above the door, pure instinct when a predator was nearby. But at the same time, I felt an odd calm watching the sleeping wolf. There was something about it that wasn't just animal. It was almost wise. I couldn't find the right word. All I remember is thinking that someday I'd tell Tommy this incredible story, if, of course, the wolf had actually gone back to the woods by the time he arrived. The wolf stayed in my cabin for 3 days. In that time, it grew stronger, its wound began healing, and its appetite matched that of a healthy animal. I knew I'd have to let it go soon. Keeping a wild predator was too dangerous. Plus, Tommy's arrival was getting closer. On the fourth morning, I woke to find my strange guest sitting by the door, watching me with those golden eyes. I knew instantly it was ready to leave. "You miss your pack already, huh?" I asked, opening the door. "You'll find your way home?" The wolf stepped slowly onto the porch, paused, and looked at me as if saying goodbye before trotting toward the woods. At the tree line, it stopped, turned, and let out a short howl, not a threat, but somehow grateful. Then it vanished among the trees for good. I stood on the porch long after its silver form disappeared into the pines. Strangely, I felt something like grief. In those few days, I'd grown used to its presence, the quiet breathing in the corner, the watchful gaze following my movements. "Ghost," I said aloud. Ghost. The name came to me on its own as I thought of the silver fur that made it nearly invisible in the winter woods. Tommy arrived 3 days later, and life returned to normal. We fished. I taught him to track animals, and in the evenings we played chess by the fire. But I kept catching myself listening for sounds outside, glancing at the window as if expecting to see a familiar shape. "Dad," Tommy said on the fifth day, "you're acting weird. You keep looking out the window. Are you expecting someone?" I smiled and ruffled his hair. "No, just an old habit. Staying alert in the woods. That's how you survive." That evening, I told him the story of the wolf I'd pulled from the frozen lake. Tommy's eyes lit up with excitement. "You really had a wild wolf here in the cabin?" he asked, incredulous. "And it didn't try to eat you?" "No," I said carefully. "It was different, like it understood I was trying to help." Will it come back? Tommy asked hopefully. I really want to see it. Unlikely, I said, shrugging. Wild animals usually avoid people, and that's how it should be. At the time, I had no idea of the nightmare waiting for us. A few days later, returning from fishing, Tommy and I noticed strange tracks around the cabin, clearly wolf prints. The next day, while I chopped wood and Tommy gathered kindling, a silver shadow flickered at the edge of the woods, freezing us both. Dad, that's it, isn't it? Your wolf? Tommy whispered. Maybe, I answered quietly, keeping my eyes on the trees. But it's not my wolf. It belongs to itself. The wolf stood at the tree line, half hidden in pine shadows, but I recognized it instantly by its silver fur and proud stance. It didn't approach, just watched us. There was no aggression in its demeanor. Can I go closer? Tommy asked, tugging my sleeve. No, I said firmly. Even if it remembers me, it's still a wild animal. It needs its space. Tommy reluctantly agreed, but from that day on, he'd run to the window first thing every morning, hoping to see the wolf again. And to his delight, Ghost, as I'd come to call it in my mind, started appearing more often. Sometimes we'd see it at the tree line, other times just as tracks around the cabin. One morning, we even found a field mouse on the porch, undoubtedly a gift. Tommy was thrilled. I was a little wary, but secretly pleased. Then about a week later, something happened that made me see our strange relationship with the wolf in a new light. A park ranger named Rick Hansen stopped by to check how I was handling the harsh winter. Rick was a decent man, but had very traditional views on wildlife. I've been tracking a big silver wolf in your area, he said, warming his hands on a coffee mug. Strange animal, gets too close to human spaces. Could be dangerous. I tensed. You're not planning to hunt it, are you? Rick shrugged. If it becomes a threat, I'll have to. A few hunters from the village across the lake have already complained. Say it's been watching them. That wolf's no threat, I said. It's just curious. Rick gave me a suspicious look. You know something about it, Mike? I hesitated, unsure whether to share the rescue story. But in the end, I thought the truth might help. I pulled it from an ice hole a few weeks ago, I admitted. It was nearly dead. I kept it here for 3 days until it recovered. Since then, it's shown up now and then, but it's never been aggressive. Rick whistled. Damn it, Mike! You brought a wild wolf into your home? Are you insane? What if it attacked you in your sleep? It didn't, I said firmly. It had the chance, but chose to leave peacefully. Listen, Rick, I know it sounds crazy, but this wolf's different. It's like it's grateful. Wolves don't feel gratitude, Rick cut in. They're wild animals. They act on instinct, not emotion. Then how do you explain it bringing us prey and showing no aggression? Tommy interjected, having listened quietly the whole time. Rick just shook his head. Look, Mike, I respect your love for wildlife, but for your safety, especially your kids, stay away from that wolf. Don't feed it, don't encourage it. Let it live in the woods where it belongs. After Rick left, Tommy and I sat in silence for a long time. Logically, I knew Rick was right, but something in me resisted the idea that Ghost was just a wild animal following instinct. Dad, Tommy finally said, breaking the silence, you won't let the ranger kill our wolf, will you? I sighed deeply. It's not our wolf, Tommy, and I can't stop the ranger from doing his job. But Ghost hasn't hurt anyone. That's not fair. I looked at my son, surprised by the intensity of his emotions. In just a few days, he'd grown attached to a wolf he'd barely seen. And who was I to judge? I felt the same strange bond with the silver forest spirit. Listen, I said, putting a hand on Tommy's shoulder. I'll talk to Rick again. I'll ask him to give us time. If the wolf stays out of trouble, maybe they'll leave it alone. The next morning, we woke to a strange noise, a soft scratching at the door. Instinctively, I reached for the rifle, but Tommy was already at the window. "Dad, it's Ghost!" he shouted. "It's outside!" I rushed over and couldn't believe my eyes. There, sitting calmly on the porch as if it belonged there, was our silver wolf. When it saw us through the window, it stood and took a few steps back, as if inviting us outside. "It wants us to follow it," Tommy said confidently. "How do you know?" I asked, though the same thought had crossed my mind. "I just do," Tommy said, shrugging. "Can we go?" I hesitated. On one hand, it was a fierce predator. On the other, it had never shown aggression. And I couldn't shake the feeling it genuinely wanted to show us something. "All right," I said finally, "but stay close. No sudden movements." We dressed and stepped onto the porch. Ghost waited at a safe distance, watching us closely. As we descended the steps, it turned and walked slowly toward the woods, glancing back now and then to make sure we followed. "See? Told you," Tommy whispered triumphantly. We followed the wolf for about 15 minutes, trailing a barely visible path, pausing whenever it stopped to let us catch up. Finally, we reached a small clearing surrounded by tall pines. Ghost stopped and turned to us, as if waiting for something. "Why did it bring us here?" Tommy asked, looking around. "There's nothing here." I didn't understand either, until I noticed a strange pile of branches and snow under one of the pines. As I got closer, I realized it was a den. "Dad, look!" Tommy pointed at the dark entrance. "There's something in there." Sure enough, several pairs of curious eyes peered out from the shadows. Wolf pups. 3 or 4 little silver-gray creatures, just like their father. "Wow," Tommy breathed. "It has a family. It showed us its family." Ghost stood apart, showing no fear, as if it trusted us completely. It was unbelievable. A wild wolf had led us to its den, to its young. I'd never heard of wolves behaving this way. "It's proud of them," I said, unable to think of another explanation. "It wanted us to know why it's been coming here. It's protecting the place its young are growing up." We didn't stay long, not wanting to disturb the pups. On the way back, I thought about what I'd tell Rick. Now I understood why Ghost had been lingering near human areas. It was guarding its family. And judging by the absence of a mate near the den, it was doing so alone. That same day, I went to Rick and told him everything, except the den's exact location. I saw the doubt on his face, but he finally agreed to give the wolf a chance. "But if there are any reports of attacks, Mike, I can't ignore that," he warned. I nodded, knowing it was the best I could hope for. The next few days passed quietly. Ghost appeared every morning as if checking on us, then vanished back into the woods. Tommy even started leaving food for it, leftover dinner or fish we'd caught. To my surprise, the wolf accepted the offerings, though I tried to explain to Tommy that feeding wild animals wasn't a good idea. The trouble came from where we least expected it. One day I decided to show Tommy a beautiful spot a few kilometers from the cabin. A small waterfall that froze into a stunning ice sculpture in winter. We left early in the morning, carrying food, warm clothes, and a flare gun, just in case. It was a perfect day. Sunny, still, with a light frost. Tommy loved the hike, the way I taught him to read tracks in the snow, the breathtaking views from the high ridges. We picnicked by the waterfall, enjoying the sunlight dancing through the ice crystals. "Dad, look," Tommy said suddenly, pointing across the bank. "Someone's over there." I squinted in the direction he indicated and felt a chill down my spine. On the hillside, half hidden by shrubs, stood a massive black bear. In our region, bears were rare in winter. They usually hibernated until spring, but sometimes hunger or disturbance drove them out early. And these winter bears were especially dangerous, hungry, irritable, and aggressive. "Don't move," I said quietly to Tommy. "Hand me the flare gun from the backpack." Slowly. But it was too late. The bear had noticed us and was already making its way down to the river, sniffing the air. It looked gaunt, its fur hanging in clumps, its eyes wild and unhealthy. A cold sweat broke out on my back. This was the worst-case scenario. "Tommy," I said as calmly as I could, "when I tell you, start walking slowly back to the trail. Don't run, don't shout, just move slowly." The bear had crossed the river and was now on our side, about 50 yards away. It stood on its hind legs, sniffing again, and I realized with horror that it had caught the scent of our food. "Now," I said, raising the flare gun. "Go back slowly." Tommy tried to step back, but his foot slipped on an icy rock. He fell, crying out in pain. The bear reacted instantly to the sound and movement, dropping to all fours and charging toward us with terrifying speed. "Don't move," I shouted at Tommy, firing the flare. There was a loud bang and a bright red streak in the sky. Normally, that would scare off any wild animal, but this bear was either too hungry or too enraged. It paused for a second, then kept coming, snarling. I fumbled to reload the flare gun, knowing we had only seconds. "Tommy, behind me," I ordered, trying to shield my son with my body. Second flare. Another red flash lit the sky. The bear flinched briefly, then reared up on its hind legs, roaring deafeningly. I knew there wouldn't be a third shot. The bear was too close now, and I didn't have time to reload. Tommy and I backed slowly toward the trees, never taking our eyes off the enraged animal.
My hand instinctively went to my pocket for my knife, a pitiful defense against 300 pounds of muscle and claws, but all I had. When the distance between us shrank to a few yards, I knew running was pointless. The bear would catch us in seconds. Our only chance was to make as much noise as possible to scare it off. I grabbed a nearby branch and started banging it against a tree trunk, shouting at the top of my lungs. Tommy immediately understood and joined in, clanging rocks together with a metal cup. For a moment it seemed to work. The bear paused, confused by the sudden noise. But then, like a nightmare, it charged again, faster this time. I knew we were done. The only thing left was to buy Tommy a few extra seconds by drawing the bear's attention. "Run to the big cedar and climb," I whispered to my son. "I'll distract it." "No, Dad." Tommy's eyes were wide with fear. "Do as I say," I shouted, stepping forward and waving the branch. "Hey, furball, over here, come on." The bear turned toward me, and I backed away, trying to lure it from Tommy. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my son limping toward the tree and starting to climb. At least he'd be safe. As for me, I'd do what I could. I can't say how long the standoff lasted. Maybe a minute, maybe 5. I kept retreating, waving the branch, trying to keep distance between me and the bear. It followed, sometimes speeding up, sometimes slowing, as if toying with its prey. I heard Tommy calling from afar, but I couldn't afford to be distracted. Then, at some point, the bear seemed tired of the game. It suddenly lunged forward, closing the gap in seconds. I threw the branch aside, useless now, and drew my knife, knowing it was my last line of defense. The bear was so close I could smell its hot, rancid breath and see the yellow teeth in its gaping maw. In another second it would be on me. Then something happened that I never expected. Like a flash of silver, a shadow shot from behind the trees and slammed into the bear's side. Ghost! The magnificent silver wolf lunged at the bear's throat, snarling viciously. The bear roared in pain and surprise, trying to shake off the attacker, but Ghost held on, tearing with its sharp teeth. I stood frozen in shock, unable to believe what I was seeing. It was incredible, a lone wolf attacking an animal many times its size. But even more astonishing was the fact that Ghost seemed to be doing it to protect us. The bear and wolf circled each other in a deadly dance, one swinging powerful claws, the other dodging and attacking again, aiming for the throat and eyes. Blood stained the snow red. I knew how this would end. Ghost couldn't last long against such a massive opponent. Then, as if hearing my thoughts, 3 more silver shadows emerged from the woods, wolves from Ghost's pack, coming to their leader's aid. Now the bear was surrounded, attacked from all sides. Not even such a powerful beast could withstand a coordinated wolf pack. Within minutes, it was over. The bear, wounded and bloodied, limped into the woods, pursued by 2 wolves. Ghost and another wolf stayed behind, breathing hard, making sure the danger was gone. Only when certain we were safe did Ghost turn to us. "Dad, are you okay?" Tommy had climbed down from the tree and was limping toward me. "I'm fine," I said, my eyes still on the wolf. "Thanks to our friend." Ghost stood a few feet away, breathing heavily, the fur on its side matted with blood, a wound from the bear's claws. In its golden eyes I saw something I never expected to see in a wild animal: awareness, determination, and, yes, maybe even nobility. "Thank you," I said softly, knowing it wouldn't understand the words but hoping my tone conveyed the meaning. "You saved us." The wolf dipped its head slightly, as if acknowledging the thanks, then turned and limped into the woods. The other wolf followed, and soon both disappeared among the trees. "Will it come back?" Tommy asked as we made our way back to the cabin, still shaken by what had happened. "I don't know," I admitted, "but when it does, we'll be ready." We didn't sleep that night. We kept every lamp lit, stocked the fire, and I treated Tommy's bruised leg, thanking the gods it had ended with just fear and a few scrapes. "Why do you think it did that, Dad?" Tommy asked as we sat by the fire staring into the flames. "Why would Ghost risk its life for us? I think it was a kind of gratitude," I said slowly, choosing my words. "I saved its life, and it repaid the debt. But it's more than that. Maybe it felt we were friends, that we belonged in its territory, maybe even its family in some way." "Do you think it'll survive? It's hurt. Wolves are tough," I said, though I was worried too. "And it has a pack now. They'll take care of it." The next morning we found fresh wolf tracks on the porch. Ghost had come during the night to check on us. The thought made me smile. A week passed. It was time for Tommy to go home. Winter break was over. We packed his things and I took him to the bus station in town. On the way, he talked non-stop about Ghost, the wolf pups, and how he'd tell this incredible story to his mom and friends. "They won't believe me," he sighed as we said goodbye at the station. "It doesn't matter if they do," I smiled, hugging him. "What matters is that it happened, and you know the truth." When I got back to the cabin, the first thing I did was follow the familiar path to the wolf den. I didn't get too close. I just wanted to make sure Ghost was okay. To my relief, I saw the silver shape on the hillside, the wolf guarding its territory.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to support our channel. See you in the next episode. Stay tuned.